Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever witnessed a movie trailer that completely shattered everything you thought you knew about a beloved story? Well, Edgar Wright's 2025 adaptation of The Running Man just dropped the most jaw-dropping plot twist that nobody saw coming, and I'm here to break down exactly why this changes everything we thought we knew about Stephen King's dystopian masterpiece. What I'm about to reveal will completely transform how you view this entire franchise, because what Wright has done isn't just an adaptation. It's a revolutionary reimagining that takes the source material in a direction so bold, so unexpected, that even Stephen King himself had to sign off on changes that will leave audiences speechless. But before I dive into the shocking details that have fans across the internet losing their minds, let me give you some context about why this matters so much. The original Running Man from 1987 starring Arnold Schwarzenegger was entertaining, sure, but it barely resembled King's dark, twisted novel. Wright knew this, and he made a promise to deliver something that would honor the source material while completely flipping the script on what we expected. What he's delivered is nothing short of brilliant, and the numbers prove it. This film cost $110 million to produce, and Wright spent every penny crafting something that feels both terrifyingly relevant to our current world and completely fresh at the same time. Now, here's where things get absolutely insane. The biggest shock isn't just that Wright changed the ending, it's how he changed it, and why Stephen King not only approved, but actually praised the decision. King, who famously disliked the Schwarzenegger version for straying too far from his vision, told Entertainment Weekly that Wright's adaptation is fantastic and called it a bipartisan thrill ride. But here's the kicker that nobody talks about. King had to personally sign off on the most controversial change in movie adaptation history, and his reasoning will blow your mind. The original novel ends with Ben Richards making the ultimate sacrifice by crashing a hijacked plane directly into the network's headquarters building. Sound familiar? Yeah, that's because when Wright sat down to adapt this story in 2025, he realized that recreating King's explosive finale would feel disturbingly similar to the September 11th attacks. The imagery was simply too close, too raw, too real for modern audiences to handle. So, Wright made a choice that transformed the entire meaning of the story. But wait, it gets even better. Instead of that tragic ending where Ben dies as a martyr, Wright pulls off something absolutely genius. He freeze-frames the moment right before impact, and reveals through a rebel broadcast that Ben actually escaped. We see him reuniting with his family, but not as a broken man, as a revolutionary leader who's about to change everything. And that's when the real twist happens. The next season of The Running Man begins, and the studio audience is packed with people holding signs that read, "Richards lives." The host, Killian, tries to maintain control, but the crowd isn't having it. They start throwing Molotov cocktails, storming past security and causing complete chaos. Then Ben emerges from the crowd like some kind of action hero, counts Killian down from 5, declares action, and shoots him dead on live television. This isn't just a different ending. It's a complete philosophical transformation of what the story means. King's original was a dark commentary on how society consumes violence for entertainment. Ending with the ultimate sacrifice, Wright's version keeps that commentary but adds something revolutionary. Hope. The power of the people to rise up and fight back against corrupt systems. It's the same critique wrapped in a completely different message. Glenn Powell absolutely crushed this role, and his transformation is something you have to see to believe. While he's incredibly fit, Powell isn't the muscle-bound action hero that Schwarzenegger was, and that's exactly the point. Ben Richards was always meant to be an everyman, a desperate father willing to do anything to save his daughter. Powell brings that vulnerability and desperation to life in a way that makes every punch feel real, every chase sequence feel genuinely dangerous. The supporting cast delivers performances that elevate this from a simple action flick to something much deeper. Josh Brolin, as Dan Killian, the calculating producer obsessed with ratings, creates this fascinating contrast with Powell's working-class hero. Their interactions highlight the class divide that drives the entire dystopian world Wright has created. Coleman Domingo brings charisma and menace to his role as the show's host, while the entire ensemble, including Michael Cera in a surprisingly serious role, creates a world that feels both futuristic and unnervingly familiar. But here's what really sets this adaptation apart from every other dystopian thriller you've seen. Wright doesn't just use technology as window dressing. He makes artificial intelligence and deep-fake technology central to the plot in ways that feel absolutely terrifying because of how realistic they are. The film shows how easily truth can be manipulated, how footage can be doctored, how entire narratives can be controlled by those in power. Wright himself admitted that what disturbed him most during test screenings wasn't that audiences found the technology unbelievable. It was that they understood it perfectly. Nobody questioned how the AI systems worked or how deep fakes could be used to control public perception. That level of immediate understanding, Wright said, is deeply disturbing, because it shows how close we already are to the world he's depicting on screen. The Running Man uses this technology as a weapon in the hands of the network, allowing them to manipulate public perception and control narratives in ways that feel uncomfortably relevant to current debates about misinformation and fake news. When Ben tries to broadcast his final message pleading with viewers to turn off the free V, Killian interrupts to reveal that none of it made it to air. Instead, they threaten to broadcast false footage of Ben angrily piloting the plane into the towers before shooting him down with a missile. This manipulation of truth becomes the real villain of the story, more dangerous than any individual, hunter, or corporate executive. It's the system itself, powered by technology that can make anyone believe anything, that Wright identifies as the true enemy. And that's what makes the ending so powerful. When Ben emerges from that crowd and takes control of the narrative, he's not just defeating Killian, he's defeating the entire system of lies and manipulation that keeps people powerless. The film's airplane sequence delivers some of the most intense moments you'll see in any action movie this year. McCone's shocking revelation that he was actually the survivor of the first season of The Running Man, offered the same deal as Ben, adds layers of tragedy and complexity that elevate the entire story. This isn't just about one man's fight for survival. It's about a system that corrupts everyone it touches, turning victims into perpetrators and heroes into villains. Wright's direction brings his signature style to every frame, combining practical effects with cutting-edge technology to create action sequences that feel both grounded and spectacular. The pacing never lets up, building tension from the opening moments through to that revolutionary finale that completely redefines what this story is really about. Critics have given the film mixed reviews, with a 65% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but audiences are responding much more positively. The consensus seems to be that while it may not reach the heights of Wright's previous masterpieces, it delivers on speed, visuals, and Powell's powerhouse performance. More importantly, it succeeds in updating King's vision for a modern audience without losing the core message that made the original novel so powerful. The box office numbers tell a fascinating story that nobody expected. Opening weekend brought in just $1.9 million during Thursday night previews, which had industry analysts scratching their heads. With a $110 million budget, the film needed to perform significantly better to justify its massive production costs. The break-even point sits somewhere around $275 million worldwide, which seemed like a mountain to climb after those initial numbers. But here's what makes this situation absolutely wild. The disconnect between critical reception and audience reaction reveals something deeper about what Wright accomplished here. While professional critics focused on technical execution and compared it to Wright's previous works, audiences were responding to something completely different. They were connecting with the message, the relevance, the uncomfortable mirror Wright held up to our current reality. What Wright understood that most filmmakers miss is that dystopian fiction works best when it doesn't feel fictional at all. Every element of this world, from the AI manipulation to the corporate control of media, feels like a logical extension of trends we're already seeing. The network's ability to control narratives through deep fakes isn't science fiction anymore. It's Tuesday. The casting choices become even more brilliant when you understand Wright's broader vision. Glenn Powell's everyman approach works because Ben Richards isn't supposed to be a superhero. He's supposed to be us. A regular person pushed to extraordinary lengths by impossible circumstances. When Powell throws those desperate punches or makes those split-second survival decisions, you believe it, because he looks like someone who learned to fight out of necessity, not training. Michael Cera's serious supporting role surprised everyone who expected his typical comedic persona. Wright deliberately cast against type throughout the film, creating a world where nothing feels predictable or safe. Even the familiar faces carry an edge of uncertainty that keeps you guessing about their true motivations until the very end. The technical achievement here cannot be overstated. Wright and his team created a visual language that makes the technology feel both advanced and accessible. The AI systems don't look like magical movie computers. They look like slightly more sophisticated versions of systems we interact with every day. That familiarity makes their misuse feel more threatening than any laser gun or flying car ever could. But let's talk about that airplane sequence again because it deserves deeper analysis. When McCone reveals his true identity as a previous Running Man winner, Wright isn't just delivering a plot twist. He's showing us the cyclical nature of oppression. The system doesn't just crush people. It converts them into tools for crushing others. McCone's tragedy isn't that he was a victim. It's that he chose to become a perpetrator rather than fight back. This revelation transforms our understanding of every hunter in the film. They're not just employees of the network. They're previous contestants who made different choices than Ben. Each one represents a path Ben could have taken, a compromise he could have made. When Ben refuses Killian's offer to become a hunter himself, he's not just rejecting money. He's rejecting the entire cycle that creates people like McCone. The pamphlets that Ben sends out with Amelia in that parachute represent something revolutionary in action cinema. They're not just plot devices. They're symbols of information warfare, of grassroots resistance, of the power of truth to spread, even when official channels are controlled. Wright shows us that revolution doesn't always require violence. Sometimes it requires nothing more than people knowing what's really happening. Killian's final moments reveal the true genius of Wright's approach. When Ben counts him down from 5 and declares, "Action," he's not just killing the man who tormented him, he's taking control of the medium itself. The countdown that begins every episode of The Running Man becomes the countdown to Killian's execution. Ben isn't just defeating his enemy, he's rewriting the rules of the game entirely. The audience riot that precedes this moment shows Wright's understanding of how media manipulation actually works. The people in that studio aren't actors or paid plants. They're regular citizens who finally saw through the lies and decided to act. Their Richard's Lives banners aren't just supporting a person. They're supporting the idea that resistance is possible, that the system can be beaten. What makes this ending so powerful is how it transforms the entire viewing experience. When you go back and watch the earlier scenes knowing how it ends, every moment carries different weight. Ben's defiance isn't just heroic, it's strategic. His refusal to play by their rules isn't just moral, it's tactical. Wright created a film that rewards multiple viewings because the ending changes everything that came before. The international box office performance will ultimately determine whether this approach succeeds commercially, but Wright has already succeeded artistically. He took a story that many considered impossible to adapt faithfully, and found a way to honor both the source material and modern sensibilities. Stephen King's endorsement carries weight not just because he's the original author, but because he's notoriously critical of adaptations that miss the point of his work. The bipartisan appeal that King mentioned isn't accidental. Wright crafted a story that speaks to universal fears about media manipulation, corporate power, and the erosion of truth itself. These aren't partisan concerns, they're human concerns. The film succeeds because it focuses on those shared anxieties rather than trying to score political points. Glenn Powell's physical transformation for this role demonstrates his commitment to Wright's vision. He spent months preparing not just his body but his understanding of what desperation looks like, how it moves, how it fights. Every bruise and cut on his face tells the story of someone who's been pushed beyond his limits but refuses to break. The real test of Wright's adaptation will come in the weeks ahead as word of mouth spreads and audiences discover the film for themselves. The cultural impact of this adaptation extends far beyond box office numbers or critical scores. Wright has created something that feels like a prophecy rather than entertainment, and that's what has people talking long after they leave the theater. Social media exploded with discussions about which elements of the film feel most realistic, with many viewers pointing to the AI manipulation sequences as uncomfortably plausible. What's fascinating is how Wright managed to update King's vision without losing the core DNA that made the original novel so compelling. The desperation, the class warfare, the media manipulation, all of these elements remain intact while being filtered through a contemporary lens that makes them feel urgently relevant. The freebie network that controls the population through entertainment isn't just a clever update of King's original concept. It's a direct commentary on how streaming platforms and social media algorithms shape public opinion today. The technical wizardry behind the deepfake sequences required Wright and his team to walk a careful line between showcasing the technology's capabilities and not providing a how-to guide for malicious use. Every fake video shown in the film was created using techniques that exist right now, which explains why test audiences found nothing unbelievable about the concept. That immediate acceptance reveals how quickly we've all adapted to living in a world where seeing is no longer believing. Powell's performance becomes even more impressive when you consider the physical demands Wright placed on him. This isn't just running and gunning. It's sustained desperation across nearly 2 hours of screen time. Every chase sequence, every fight, every moment of terror had to feel genuine because the entire emotional core of the film depends on believing that this ordinary man can do extraordinary things when his family's life hangs in the balance. The supporting performances create a world that feels lived in rather than constructed. Josh Brolin's Killian never feels like a cartoon villain despite his monstrous actions. He's a businessman making rational decisions within an irrational system, which makes him infinitely more terrifying than any cackling mastermind could be. Coleman Domingo brings charisma to his role. That makes you understand why audiences would tune in to watch people die for entertainment. But it's the smaller moments that really showcase Wright's understanding of the source material. When Ben interacts with other contestants or ordinary citizens, you see the class divisions that drive King's dystopian vision. These aren't just plot points or background details. They're the foundation that makes everything else believable. The wealthy view the poor as entertainment, and the poor have been convinced that participating in their own exploitation is their only path to survival. The airplane sequence delivers multiple revelations that recontextualize everything that came before. McCone's confession about being a previous winner adds layers of tragedy that extend beyond his individual story. It suggests that the network has been running this program for years, possibly decades, creating a cycle of victims who become perpetrators. The system doesn't just consume people, it transforms them into instruments of consumption. Wright's decision to have Ben reject the Hunter offer isn't just about moral superiority. It's about breaking that cycle entirely. When Ben refuses to become part of the system that destroyed his life, he's making a choice that McCone, and presumably countless others, couldn't make. That moment of refusal becomes the foundation for everything that follows, including his eventual takeover of the entire operation. The visual language Wright employs throughout the film creates a world that feels both futuristic and familiar. The technology looks advanced enough to be impressive, but recognizable enough to be threatening. The drones, the surveillance systems, the AI interfaces. Everything feels like it could exist 5 years from now rather than 50, which amplifies the horror of watching it used for oppression. International audiences will likely respond differently to various elements of the film depending on their own experiences with media manipulation and authoritarian control. What reads as dystopian fiction to some viewers will feel like documentary footage to others. Wright's genius lies in creating a story universal enough to resonate across different political and cultural contexts while remaining specific enough to feel urgent and immediate. So there you have it, folks. Wright didn't just adapt The Running Man, he completely revolutionized what a Stephen King adaptation could be, from that game-changing ending that transforms tragedy into hope, to the terrifyingly realistic AI manipulation that mirrors our current reality. This film proves that sometimes the most shocking twist is giving audiences exactly what they didn't know they needed. Now go check it out for yourself, and see why everyone's still talking about that final countdown scene.